and welcome to the Smartest Moron, where today we're looking at one of my favorite game series of all time, Devil May Cry. Starting with the first one at least, and we aren't covering the reboot for a long time.
I initially got into the series back in high school, when a friend of mine decided to give me all of his Devil May Cry games. I can't remember the details why I asked for them, but it likely had something to do with X-Play. From then on, I marathoned the entirety of the DMC series, and I fell in love. Barring Game 2, of course. It actually motivated me to buy a used Xbox 360 so I could play Devil May Cry 4 as soon as possible. A shame I failed to see that the cooling fan for the 360 would force me to buy a new system. Damn red ring and lack of Google foo, and lack of brain power. Anyway, time for some backstory. Devil May Cry was originally going to be Resident Evil 4, as the idea for Resident Evil was to make the gameplay cool and stylish. The game was supposed to be directed by Hideki Kamiya, who you might know as the creator of Bayonetta, and the guy who no doubt blocked you on Twitter, and he was the one to come up with the idea. Meanwhile, the series writer, Noboru Sugimura, originally had the idea, and I quote from Wikipedia, of a story was based on unraveling the mystery surrounding the body of protagonist Tony, an invincible man with skills and intellect exceeding that of normal people, his superhuman abilities explained with biotechnology. Insert your own joke on nanomachines here. Of course, producer Shinji Mikami felt this style strayed far too much from the survival horror roots Resident Evil was known for.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine Resident Evil being more action-oriented? I mean, do you honestly think that would actually succeed at all? I mean, yeah, I'm just pointing at this from now on. We both know the answer to this.
Hideki Kamiya took the concept of this Resident Evil idea, did away with certain aspects, built a world with demons, and called it Devil May Cry. He even used the scenario Sugimura had written up, changing up some details, of course. He also changed certain aspects of the gameplay, and the inspiration was an odd one. See, Kamiya found a bug in Onimusha Warlords, where one could juggle the enemy in the air, and that became the inspiration for the combat system. And of course the difficulty was intentional, as Kamiya wanted to challenge those who were used to playing casually. Considering some of the hell I remember enduring back when I first played, boy was that a factor he did right! What followed though became a PS2 classic for its difficulty and the popular main character, earning 3 games of varying quality, and a reboot that exists. Yeah, I'll try not to insult the reboot while talking about this series too much to prevent this from being ranty. Otherwise, I'll get sidetracked.
Can the game still hold up, or is the blade finally dulled? This is the review of Devil May Cry 1 from the HD collection.
Devil May Cry is a third-person action game, where you take control of the main character, Dante. You start off with a sword, but eventually gain new weapons by going through each individual mission, such as the lightning blade Alistair that does that. But don't worry, Dante gets up like it's nothing, though good god that hurts to see. You'll also get a few guns along the way, and while not as damaging as physical attacks, which kinda makes sense since you have infinite ammo in this game, they have their uses, like using shotguns to knock down foes and have more breathing room, or using certain devil arms to take advantage of their strengths. Careful use should be considered, like the Ifrit is very handy against the plasma and the frost enemies. Since this is the first game of the series, the style meter is not incredibly great, and that's mostly due to the lack of insane combos DMC 3 and 4 are known for. Most combos that can be kept up usually involve pausing a bit before continuing to attack to change a move style, such as several stabs. Just keep hitting foes without getting hit and your style meter will increase. You can also transform Dante into a demon via the Devil Trigger. This allows Dante to be faster, slowly heal, and of course hit harder. However, move types can change based on what weapon you have while Devil Triggered. For example, having Alistair can enable Dante to fly. Using moves such as the Stinger or launching an opponent to the air remains quite satisfying, and useful for staving off certain foes. However, before you can actually play with all those neat skills, they need to be purchased first by using red blood orbs found on beaten enemies and throughout the stage. It's certainly motivation to keep on fighting enemies, as opposed to running away from fights. But the quantity and quality of these red orbs feels so much lower, so it's unlikely you're going to earn enough to buy every skill, meaning you have to choose what to buy carefully. Also, you can't buy multiple items of certain types, like healing stars, so no item cheating. Well, mostly no item cheating depending on some fights. Items and skills are not the only things that can be bought, as you can buy upgrades to Dante's health bar and his Devil Trigger mode. Another neat idea I love is the ability to actually taunt foes. Not only is it satisfying in mocking a foe, and it perfectly fits Dante's character, it can also slowly restore your devil trigger. Timing it though will require knowing your foe, otherwise you are opening yourself for a damn good smack in the face. But gameplay consists of more than just slashing and shooting. Well, still a bit more shooting. There are brief moments where the gameplay deviates from the norm, such as going underwater, which honestly didn't control too well, but at least you can flee in some of those fights. However, then you have the secret missions found throughout the levels, and very missable as well since there's no easy way to identify what is a secret mission. Usually it's done by entering previous rooms, or examining things in earlier rooms. While some are filled with tough fights, like trying to get certain enemy types to kill one another, others rely on different means to succeed, like playing Mario with the enemies to get stuff. These are important to do though, as each one grants a piece of a blue orb. In addition to finding them scattered throughout the castle, when you gather all 4, Dante's maximum health increases. It can certainly help save in buying health upgrades. The presentation is still impressive even to this day, as it drips with atmosphere. You even have to collect certain objects to travel around the castle keep, which keeps hammering points that this is probably the best 3D Castlevania game next to Devil May Cry 3. And the best Devil May Cry game is of course Bayonetta. Sound effects add much more to this as well, like the laughing of the Sins here.
Are they gone?
Or even stuff like the simple movements of the puppets. Their designs are also pretty great too, especially with the HD visuals. While it may not look as good as other games of the era, the designs do invoke a bit of horror to the action, which works a lot for a game like this, since the idea is to both feel like a badass and dread certain encounters more than others. This is mainly with enemies like the stronger Sin types, or the dreaded Shadow Cats, which do rely on dodging and hitting with guns to defeat. Their movements however ensure you need to dodge at the right times, and their attacks tend to be various. These enemies are quick, and demand you have to be as well. The moments did feel a bit cheap, and it's largely due to the camera. Now, sometimes it works just fine, giving you a good view of enemies. However, sometimes it refuses to move, so you can't see the damn attacks coming towards you, leaving you dead very easily. This is the worst when in cramped areas, like one secret room that has you fighting 3 Shadow Cats, and in a super small area. That is hell! Or even the final nightmare fight, which has the camera unable to move and it blocks your sight of Dante, leaving you hit constantly, and it's frigging annoying. The game also introduces continues in the form of yellow orbs, which allow you to pick up where you left off just before you died and were unable to save. It's kinda handy during boss fights to not go through the entire stage again, but since it doesn't give you back used items, you might be better off just restarting the game instead. Seriously, I don't get why that was done in a game this difficult. It doesn't even work for phases.
But hey, at least games don't do this nowadays, I think. You know, with the exception of Mighty No. 9, because that is a pile of crap.
Another factor that is not explained is how to get the best ranks in missions. Future Devil May Cry games are thankfully more clear-cut about it, but style doesn't really matter much. It's dependent on 3 factors: finishing as fast as you can, the amount of orbs you gain, and taking less and less damage. The degree can go as high as S, though like I said, sometimes the camera or darker visual areas make it harder to accomplish that. Also, these stages cannot be repeated, so perfectionists might be annoyed as hell when trying to get S ranks. You can also save during each stage, but you'll have to start right over again anyway. The only difference being that you'll actually be gaining some red orbs. It's actually the best way to earn red orbs to grind out for skills, since playing through this game, it's unlikely you'll be able to buy everything you need. And trust me, that double jump is worth it. Beating the game does unlock more bonuses, though it's mostly harder difficulties, though beating them also does allow the player to control Sparta, and marks the first appearance of Yamato, and it seems to control exactly like all other swords, so that's disappointing. If you somehow get extremely low grades, you can unlock an easy mode with automatic mode, which I don't recommend, just take my word for it. Hell, I can hardly recommend hard mode because good lord, yeah, the game will punish you hard. Enemies take away so much health, bringing more Shadow Cats, and I even had trouble with the first boss. Overall, the combat comes down to age wearing it down, and the other games like Devil May Cry 3 improving on all of these aspects and refining them. Plus things like jumping and the camera need much more improvement. But I still had a lot of fun despite the flaws. And even if I was able to cheese bosses barring hard mode. Still, the game is short, about 6 to 7 hours, so replaying the higher difficulties is encouraged. Hell, it might be shorter than that given all the speedrunning stuff.
Almost. I only take special jobs, if you know what I mean.
You're the man who lost a mother and a brother to evil 20 years ago. The son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta, Mr. Dante.
Well, the way I figure it, in this business a lot of your kind comes around. And if I kill each one that comes, eventually I should hit the jackpot sooner or later.
The story opens up with a narration with hardly readable text about a demon badass named Sparta who helped save the world when demons threatened to take it over nearly 2,000 years ago. Was this his audition to be a part of a Power Ranger season or something? That would have been awesome to see in Time Force. But yeah, explanation of how Sparta drove back the demons, including Mundus, and the demon badass did eventually settle down to have 2 kids. We eventually cut in on one of those kids, Dante and his business, the Devil May Cry. Already lined up with trophies of fallen demons and lady posters. He's soon interrupted as a woman crashes right into his home with a motorcycle. Dante is surprisingly lax about the whole thing.
Whoa, slow down, babe. Well, what do we have here? Nature calls? It's in the back.
It's actually a sign of how we aren't dealing with the typical hero, as heroes back then usually followed one of just a few types. Brooding asshole with a good heart, happy and wants to make friends, or the reluctant guy. Dante, on the other hand, oozes confidence and actively seeks fights without succumbing to anime tropes tied to people like Yusuke Urameshi. No, that's not a slam against Yusuke Urameshi. He is freaking awesome. And really, it's to get closer to finding and defeating Mundus and avenge his mother. Those we later see in the series, and even in the game against future boss encounters, he likes the challenge as well, being a demon and whatnot. It's why the style meter is even there, even if it ain't perfect. The same goes for taunting as well. This is a guy who seems to love whatever challenge is thrown his way. Though he does get his ass handed to him by the woman, impaled with his own sword, struck by lightning, and even has the motorcycle thrown his way. Why don't you just throw the kitchen sink while you're at it? But even after all that, Dante's able to prove why he is the son of Sparta, as he manages to shoot the motorcycle away and gets back up quite easily. Of course, now the woman, who I shall refer to as Trish from now on, reveals that she was just testing Dante.
Yeah, lady, I think it's just way too late to back out of this. There's a difference between testing someone and flat-out murder.
But because she looks exactly like Dante's mom and is linked to Mundus, she is not getting a million stabs. And once they do arrive on said island, Trish immediately tells Dante to follow her, and of course, he decides to take the long-ass way around to do so by going through the castle. Again, a man that likes to do things the hard way and an inconvenient way. Seriously, I tried jumping after her, it doesn't work. From here, the story hardly has much story or character development. Anything done with Trish is done towards near the end of the game, and she appears only after Dante defeats 2 of Mundus' generals. The villains don't really have much to them aside from their boss tactics and designs, which are still fairly good to this day. Even Nilo Angelo, the rival character for Dante, lacks much aside from the fact that he is honorable. And a spoiler, so it's up to the combat to help carry the struggle of Dante's journey to defeat Mundus, which is still entertaining. And with some bosses trying to chase Dante down, it shows their fierce determination to stop him, even if they are driven off each time. The voice acting is also pretty weak, as you already know with one famous quote, but what really makes it annoying is the music and lack of subtitles at times. Just try listening to this scene.
My mother used to always tell me that my father was a man who fought.
What? I can't hear you!
Courage.
Your dramatic music is blowing out my ears!
In the name of my father, I will.
I still can't hear you!
Really, the story only holds up because of its main character, and that's because Dante is frigging awesome. But we'll have to dive into the spoilers to see why.
What a big surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours.
For the spoiler section, we'll focus on Dante and Trish since, well, they are pretty much the only characters with any character to them. The major demon generals are just loyal to Mundus, and Mundus himself is more well known for his tough boss fight, which I cheesed with items just to see if I could. Man, past me was an idiot for not doing this. Dante doesn't really have that much of an arc in the story. He's mostly joking around and being cocky around enemies, and openly taunts Mundus' minions. Only Nilo Angelo seems to stir anything up, and is pretty much the closest to a rival character. However, he lacks dialogue, only really grunting, and even with the revelation that it was Virgil, there's no real emotion given by Dante. The closest bit is when he grabs his brother's amulet and remembers a birthday they shared with his mother, so he clearly cares about his family a ton, just not enough to show crying or the like. That's not to say he doesn't show other emotions though. It starts to show when Mundus kills his own minion, which infuriates Dante that even his big generals are just so disposable. Especially despite Griffin being so incredibly loyal. It's a fairly cliche scene though. The more interesting dynamic is with him and Trish, which is a bit wasted. She betrays you right in the middle of a boss fight with Nightmare, the worst one, making sure you don't remain at the edge of the area, or else your ass is extra toasty. After the fight, Trish is about to be crushed by debris. Yeah, I still don't know why that freaking makes sense or whatever, but Dante manages to save her life, and he only ever did so because Trish looks like his mom, leaving us to know just how much her death has impacted his life. Dante is even reluctant in letting Trish live due to her being someone unable to care, which is proven wrong later when she nearly dies for Dante's sake. Aside from the ending you know that will happen, that is also filled with tons of cheese mind you, Trish could have been expanded on some more through Dante's adventures, maybe sympathizing with the death of his brother and other stuff. Just give more reasons for her to willingly sacrifice herself to prove her humanity, to prove that she does have a soul. That would have at least made these characters interesting to bounce off of one another, because as it stands, it only has the pure cheese of the ending to uphold it together. And what's funny about their interaction is that Kamiya never intended for them to be a couple, despite what people think of the two characters. In canon, they were never shown in a romantic way either. Well, unless you count Beautiful Joe as canon, which Kamiya directed. Whoops. Still, Kamiya's idea is more interesting, and kinda proven given how they act in this game. Never kissing, and actually working together like friends to kick ass. So, unlike the reboot, the only female good guy was not forced into some stupid love interest role.
Great, I broke my rule about bringing up the reboot. Don't worry guys, I have an appropriate punishment lined up. As soon as I actually get the damn ice cube. Oh. Thought that was supposed to hurt your brain, not your teeth. Ah! Mm-hmm.
We'll come back to Dante in this game when I review Devil May Cry 3, as I feel that game enhances some of these story elements. Because as it stands now, by itself, Devil May Cry 1's plot is very weak until the end of the game, where it picks itself up and the epic finale happens. Otherwise, the plot just takes a large backseat for the journey up to the finale. Thankfully, that journey is filled with tension and awesome fights. Otherwise, it's doubtful this series would have lasted as long as it did. It showed struggle just fine while remaining true to the character, which, while a bit limited due to the gameplay, has enough mechanics to make it fun and show Dante in a favorable way. He's the type of character that, while having a good and open heart, is more than willing to make things fun for himself by taunting his foes, and that is shown in both gameplay and story. So long as they could keep its likable and fun-loving character, as well as refine the gameplay that made it so damn great, the next game could have been amazing.
Do I even need to bring up what the hell went wrong? So overall, how does Devil May Cry 1 manage to hold up? Well, age has kind of worn it down, but I still had a lot of fun with it.
The game does not hold your hand at all, nor are the controls entirely perfect. The camera in particular is the greatest enemy of this game, especially in the final battle with Nightmare. And air raid does make some encounters utterly broken and hilarious to speed by. Even so, some boss fights remain enjoyable to figure out and get through some patterns, and the enemy designs I feel are still fairly strong, and will only evolve over time. It's a shame the Shadowcats never reappeared, but their tactics were later adopted by other enemies such as those Bloodbat thingies and the Blitz. The atmosphere though is what nails this game down for me. The sound effects such as the laughing of the Sins tend to be a bit scary whenever they were around, and the environments are also pretty damn good, provided you aren't fighting in corners. The HD upgrade only helps enhance this, even if it doesn't look as good as other games today. A game like this being sold for $60 today would still be unacceptable though. In the end, age is the game's greatest enemy, as other better games will arrive and make these kind of flaws more apparent. It's why when you think of Devil May Cry, the third game comes to mind, as it refines those gameplay elements. The story may not be the greatest and definitely needs a lot of improving, but it was the first step to give us a taste of the Dante we know and love today. And a character you can have plenty of fun with, even with all that cheese.
I'm the smartest moron, and... oh dear God, I just realized I have to review Devil May Cry 2 now. What have I gotten myself into? you know, people said it's not as bad as people expected it to be. So how bad could it be, really?